Death Claims, a Dave Brandstetter mystery. Book 2. Author, Joseph Hansen. Publisher, University of Wisconsin Press, Terrace Books. Narrator, Eric Ost. Chapter 22. He swung off Western onto Yucca, trees shadowy, cars darkly asleep at curbs and in the driveways of old frame houses, where the lights were dimmed for television watching. A cat scuttled across the street on white paws and disappeared through a hedge. A lame old woman with a scarf tied over her hair dragged a wooden shopping cart on squeaky wheels along the cracked sidewalk coming from a nearby all-night market. In the next block, a thin man with a jacket hung over his shoulders held a leash, while a dachshund sniffed the tarred base of a telephone pole. Dave halted for the red tin sign at Harvard and smiled. Not much of a smile, but heartfelt. Home, Blue, would handle the rest, and handle it right. He could forget it and sleep. Last night in the white room at Madge's with the slow surf sighing under the windows, he'd got less sleep than sex. It had been good again, loving and easy after weeks of not being good, but it had left him tired. Doug was still at Madge's, but she had a house full of people coming tonight, and Dave didn't want to cope. He touched the throttle, pulled the wheel left. He'd phone Doug as soon as he got in the back door. Then he'd hit that doomed bed, and he tramped the brake, killed the motor, stared up at the street. Black and white cars stood at angles on their tops. Red lights flared, faded, flared in the bloody pulsing of the lights. Dark uniforms moved across the street. Kids, shirt-sleeved men, women in curlers gapped. Dave woke the engine, jerked the car to a curb where mustard sprouted tall in a vacant lot. He got out of the car while it still rocked. The nearest officer looked about 16, very blond. He leaned into a patrol car whose radio droned loud in a flat female voice. He hung a dashboard microphone back on its hook. Dave asked him, "What's going on?" The boy didn't look at him. He waved a hand. "Stand over there, please." He started to walk off. "That's my house," Dave said. The boy turned back, frowning. "Let me see your identification." Dave found his wallet, slipped out of its plastic folder. His driver's license, handed it to the boy. The boy tipped it to catch the greenish glare from the street light at the corner. He read it attentively, handed it back. His look was grim. "Where have you been?" "Out of town." "Now, will you tell me?" One of the cars shifted position, and the boy tugged Dave's sleeve to draw him out of the way. Two black officers were in the car. The one at the wheel backed it fast with a ripping sound from the transmission. When it was out of the way, Dave saw the yellow Lotus parked directly in front of the house. Its curbside door hung open, and by it squatted a muscular gray-haired man with a broken nose. He was talking to someone in the car. Dave couldn't see who it was. The headrest on the bucket seat was too high, but he knew the man. "Ken Barker," he said. "Is he in charge?" "He'll want to talk to you, Lieutenant." Barker squinted into the beating red lights. He stood, spoke again to the one in the car, stepped into the street. "Dave," he shook his hand, but he didn't smile. "What did Wade Cochran want with you?" "I'd only be guessing that's his car. Isn't he in it? Ask him." "He isn't in it. He's on your doorstep, dead." Dave felt punched in the stomach. He swung to stare at the house. Headlights glared across the ground, cedar dying, it too green, lit up the new for sale sign on its iron stem and threw hard against the front door. The shadow of a uniformed officer with his head bowed. The thing at his feet wore a fringed buckskin jacket, and its face was a wet glister of crimson. "Shot 3 times, Baker said. The weapon was small caliber, but the range was close. "Why, Dave?" Dave gave him a frail smile. "For our sins, Ken." He looked at the Lotus. "He brought his mother, right?" Barker nodded. "But she can't tell us anything. She's blind." Cochran got out of the car. She heard him go up the walk. "He's wearing cowboy boots. This is a quiet street." She heard your door buzzer, then another car pulled up. The door slammed. Feet ran up the walk. Cochran said, "No, just once." The gun went off 3 times. The killer ran back to his car and drove away. The old lady leaned on the horn. Couple neighbors came. "They phoned us." Barker checked his watch. 20 minutes ago. She could be away from here by now. She won't budge. She wants to talk to you. Said she'd wait all night if necessary. She sat stiff back, stoic, used to pain, stronger than pain. What ought to have been under her was a backboard seat. Her raw dignity made the car's padded leather, glittering dials and gauges, sleek curve of windshield look ridiculous. Dave crouched in the ground seater, touched her, told her who he was. She turned. "You got here." "Too late," he said. "I'm sorry." "Not your fault." He wanted to phone ahead. I said no phoning. We'll go. They listened in on phones all the time. These days, we'll talk to him face to face. She lifted her head. "Barker, you still there?" "Yes, ma'am." He stood behind Dave. "Well, go away. Find my son's killer. Everyone's looking for him." Barker said, "I have to hear what you're going to say." "All you have to hear is that killer's name, and I don't know it." Her gnarled hand caught Dave's. "You get into this car." Dave stood and looked at Barker. A nerve twitched in Barker's face, but he didn't speak. He looked stonily at Dave. His gunmetal eyes said, "You'll tell me later." Dave didn't nod. He held Barker's look for a slow count of 3. Barker could make whatever he wanted out of that. Dave went around and got behind the wheel of the Lotus. His door fell shut. He reached across and shut her door. "This can't be kept quiet," he said. "There'll be newsmen here in 5 minutes." "What I've got to say can be kept quiet," she said. "Maybe. I don't need to ask why he came. He came because you made him come. What was he going to tell me?" "That the boy didn't kill his father." She stared straight ahead at nothing. The red lights winked off the flat black of the glasses. "He was up at the lodge." "But Wade wasn't. He went to Orana Blanca." "Prepared to pay," she said. "There's stairs." He climbed them. It was cold and raining, but the door was open. He looked inside. The lights were on. Plates on the table. Meal just, etc. Coffee. Still steaming in the cups. Cigarette smoking in the ashtray, but nobody there. He called out, but nobody come. "Well, I trained him better than to go into somebody's place when they're not home." He went down and waited in the car, but not for long. Afraid he'd be seen. He come back to the ranch and rode up to the lodge. The boy was there, but Wade didn't tell him where he'd been and why. It was like you claimed it was between them, love. You called it. I can't accept that. Bible doesn't, and I can't. Lived my whole life by the word of God, raised him by it. He knew better, knew he was in the wrong. Otherwise, he'd have spoke to me about it. But that's not here, nor there, now. What is that? Is that this man's John Oates says his son told him he was going to live with Wade, and why? Just like you guessed, threatened to tell. Unless Wade brought him money. Wade was sure the boy never knew his father was a dope fiend. She gave a little dry laugh that had only despair in it. "Like you said about me, love don't let you doubt. Believeth all things, 1 Corinthians 13:7. I think he was right. The boy didn't know. Maybe. She clipped the words short. I can't like him. You can't ask me to like him. My son was all right till he came along. He was fine, just fine. The whole world thought so." Her voice trembled and went old woman thin. "And now, look what's happened. Look how it's ended." "The boy tried to save him," Dave said. "Because it was his fault, and he knew it. He thought Wade had killed his father." "Oh, yes." Her smile was crooked, triumphant. "If it was love, it ended right then and there. The day you first come to the ranch, Wade seized you up. You wouldn't stop till you found that boy, and tracking him, you'd find where they ate, that motel where they lay together in abomination. You didn't say anything about the dope, the blackmail, but you'd find out about them too, and come back. He could have washed under those fenders." Curt head shake. That wouldn't have stopped you. Not once you learned about the phone call from John Oates. He didn't know where to turn every time he'd had trouble in his life before. There'd been his mother to talk to. He couldn't talk to me about this. The boy was all he had, and the boy thought he did it. But the twist of her smile was bitter. He couldn't let Wade take the blame. Not seeing he'd brought the trouble, he'd take the blame. There was no point in living now anyways, and Wade would have let him. Dave said if it hadn't been for you, Wade would have let him go straight to the gas chamber. But the boy was wrong. Her cry had a crow's harshness. Wade didn't do it. You know that now. Somebody else did it. The same one that shot Wade. Right. Dave found the door handle, lifted it, pushed the door open. The same one with a low siren moan. An ambulance edged its way around the cluster of black and white cars. It was a tall, brown carryall. On its roof, a wan orange light revolved under a plastic blister. The machine tilted clumsily into the driveway, followed by an unmarked car with a whip antenna. Men in white jumped down from the ambulance cab, and in the headlight beams of the second car opened the rear doors to slide out an aluminum tubing stretcher and a bulky fold of gray plastic, a sack for the dead. They headed for the front door. From the unmarked car, a round-shouldered man with a small black grip trudged after them. Grace of the coroner's office. From the same car, two men followed, trampling the ground. Cedar carrying camera, lights, and glittering, spidery tripods. Dave got out of the Lotus, then turned back, bent, poked his head inside. You said he was afraid he'd be seen that night in the rain at Arana Blanca? He wasn't, she said. He told me he wasn't. He was, Dave said. Shall I phone Katie for you? She set her jar. I'll stay here with my son. But she wouldn't. As he straightened, Dave saw a mannish young woman in trim uniform get out of a newly arrived patrol car. She came toward the Lotus with a look of gentle firmness. Dave shut the door and glanced around for Barker. The white flashes of the cameraman's strobes outlined him. Near the body, watching the crouched doctor, Dave started toward him, then halted. To hell with him. He didn't have jurisdiction in El Molino. He could wait. Dave made for his car. A stocky man who looked anxious came fast along the sidewalk. A milkweed stalk clung to the cuff of his pants. He picked it up, crossing the vacant lot. Dave saw his car around the corner, white marked with radio station call letters. All the news all the time. A tape recorder in a scuffed leather case bounced at the man's hip. He waved a shiny microphone. Excuse me. Our man at the glass house got the flash. Wade Cochran's been shot to death. The TV star. Do you know anything about it? Whose house is that? Grandmother's. Dave kept walking. Only there was a wolf in the bed. He slammed inside his car, started it, yanked the lever to reverse. He floored the gas pedal and the tires screamed. Caught, jerked the car backward along the curb to the empty cross street, where he cramped the wheel, cornered, braked so the tires shouted. Again, and a third time when he set the lever to drive and took off along Yucca. A glance over his shoulder told him no one in the red light nightmare had noticed, not even the reporter. He was arguing with the tow-headed kid in uniform. A Gay Mysteries Audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.